All right, and we are live with another episode of Mentor Minutes, just a chance for leaders from around the world to come together, ask some questions, and hopefully I'm able to put some of the theory and the principles of leadership into practice in a real way that you can apply to your jobs. That's what it's all about, is the application of this material in the real world to real world situation. So if you have a question for me, if you have any concerns, any struggles that you've had this week, anything you're not looking forward to in the week to come, drop down into the comment section. I will be happy to field your questions. And if you're coming to this late, again, please drop down in the comment section. I always check the prior day's episode to see if there's any questions I missed. You can always direct message me if you want to keep yourself anonymous, or email at cm@cameronmorsey.com. You can always ask those questions that way. I'll keep you anonymous, but still get that information out there. Marisol, Brianna, you are jumping right on the gun there. You're here right from the start. I'd like to kind of discuss employee accountability. That'll be some of the thoughts and the threads that go through this particular episode while we wait for some questions to queue up here. John, Alexis, so good to see you here. Glad you were able to join. The first comment that I have in regards to employee accountability is something that actually came from yesterday's discussion of the book Extreme Ownership. And that is, you get what you tolerate. That was one of the phrases that was brought up there, actually tweaked just a little bit, but it's commonly expressed as you get what you tolerate. And so when we talk about accountability, a lot of times it's important, if the employees aren't being held accountable, that you first actually look in the mirror and see if you are excusing behavior. And it's a hard question to ask yourself. You want to say, no, I'm not excusing behavior. But a lot of times what you'll find is that because of timing, because of priorities, you don't actually engage those people that aren't meeting your expectations. And so one of the things that I like to throw out there right from the get-go when we start talking employee accountability is that you get what you tolerate. So if you are not getting the performance that you want, if you're not getting the ownership that you want, ask whether you are actually tolerating that poor behavior and what you can do about it. David, so glad you like it, and that's what I'm here to do. Alexis, Mar, good to see you here as well, and then Nikki. Now, getting into some of those accountability issues, and one of the reasons that you say tolerate bad behavior is many times it is uncomfortable to have that difficult conversation with an employee about them not being up to snuff. And I see this a lot. You know, people that are tuning into this particular podcast, this live session here, are usually good leaders that have their heart in the right place. They want to be better, and you want to believe the best in your team. And so it's often difficult to have that hard conversation with them about substandard performance. And one thing that I recommend in this is that you actually talk to them about the positive and the negative in the same way. A lot of those leaders that are real raw leaders and believe the best in their people and want to be supportive and don't necessarily get those results, part of it is because they're not having those conversations, but they're having those attaboy conversations or pats on the back or giving those accolades. And it's important that you do that. You want to give positive feedback to people. But one of the things that you can do is you can mirror the same conversation in a negative context. So when you have a disciplinary discussion with somebody, you get very specific. This is where you fell short. This is the policy that you didn't follow. This is what we need to get better. This is why it's important. What you want to do is you want to flip all of that around. If you want to have be more comfortable having a negative feedback session with an employee, have a positive feedback session with them in the same way. This is the expectation that you met. This is why it's important. This is what we can do to lock it in, or how can we lock it in? How can we develop it even more? And, this is, specifically the policy. So you get a similar flow to the discussion. It isn't just hey, this is great, good job with everything. It is, hey, it's really good that you followed up with that customer. It's important from a sales perspective that we do that each and every time. And I really appreciate that you do that because it's what establishes the relationship with the customer, just drawing an example there. So it isn't just great, thanks for getting back to the customer. It's actually following it up, and it's following a similar pattern to the discussion you would have in regards to negative feedback. Because when you have the positive feedback discussions in that way, it's more comfortable and more natural for you to call somebody in and have a negative feedback discussion. If you have given, it's Ken Blanchard that came up with the 4-to-1 rule. If you want to be viewed as a positive leader, you have to have a 4-to-1 ratio of positive feedback to negative feedback, because people pay attention to the negative more. It's just kind of human nature. So definitely have those discussions on a positive side. And when you shoot for a 2-to-1 ratio to start out with. When you have those positive discussions, it makes the negative ones more natural. And that's one way that you can kind of counteract that resistance that you might have to having those bad feedback discussions with a particular employee. All right, diving in here, because I know we've gotten a few questions. Adnan has ours, and I'm facing serious problems in implementing fives. I have to run after with people every day on same tasks, and I'm not sure what the fives actually references there. What I think, if we're running after people every day on the same task, if you're following up with them on the same task, what I want you to do is I want you to get clear on a few things. So we need to get clear on expectations. We need to follow up those expectations with some support, and then we need to create some buy-in for those expectations. So everybody that's tuning in, if you've had to follow up with employees, this is a great way to tackle it. So get crystal clear on what it is you're looking for, what the deadline is, and what the finished product is supposed to look like, okay? Get in touch with those three things. Now this last one, the finished product, you provide an example. And so if it's something that you are constantly following up on, there's likely an example from yesterday. This is exactly how I want it. This is perfect. And you give them that example so that they know how to follow up. But get crystal clear on the deadlines on those sorts of things. Now, what I want you to do is I then want you to kind of dive in and say, how can I help you do this easier? How can we make this easier? And so you're bringing them into the discussion. You will hopefully from that, and you keep asking, and oftentimes they will say, no, there's nothing. But then again, if this is a recurring thing, you can ask again tomorrow and the third time. And usually it's the third or fourth time they say, okay, fine, he's not going to go away with this. So yes, this is what would make life easier for me. And so you get some of that feedback. So be persistent with that. But what would make this easier? What would make this better? How could you do this quicker? What would be ways that we can do that I can help with? And so you put the onus on yourself to be able to provide that support or provide that okay for them to be made better or to make the situation better. What that also does, when it gives you the opportunity to create some ownership behind that process. When they have some investment in that, that's where they can drive a little bit of ownership, and you're going to get a little bit more accountability. So crystal clear expectations, crystal clear deadlines, a clear example of what it is that you want, dialogue in regards to how you can make it better, or where they're tripping up and how they're not following up with that. That can be another thing. The last thing I want to mention on this, and I'm hitting you with a bunch of stuff, Adnan, but you can always go back and just look at this again, either on Facebook or through the other channels that I'll be posting this up to. The other thing is you want to give them the why. The reason that what it is important for them to do. All right? Give them the reason, how it ties into the overall mission of the company. Who else needs this particular thing? So give them the reason it's important. That will help them stay on task when things when things start going south or when priorities start getting jumbled. The last thing that I want to mention is one that you don't necessarily want to hear, but that is, do follow up with them, but follow up at specific times. I'm a big fan of asking for updates on certain things. And so if you have somebody that's fallen by the wayside, ask for an update at one specific time where they can still correct that behavior. And you can go through the same thing again. Okay, so you're a little bit behind on that. How can we make this better? How can we make this easier? What do you need from me to get this done? And so you create that dialogue. And when you create that dialogue, you create opportunities for ownership of the task. And that's something that, when done consistently, will drive through the organization so that they hopefully will be held accountable for that, and you won't have to follow up quite as much. Ario and Luke, good to see you here as always. I wonder why you always start your life with a smile and saying, all right. A good question. How do I start my podcasts? I don't know. I just start them that way. That's what's comfortable for me. All right, let's go. You know, bam is the way some people do it. All right, we're live. So that's just it. It's kind of natural, and that's the way I like to keep these things. It's just kind of natural. It's easier than trying to put on some sort of front for it. So Nikki has a question for us, and it's, I have an employee that complains all the time. She thinks she is the only one that does anything in the workplace. She is very negative. How do I turn this around? You're going to double down on something that I suspect you may have tried before, Nikki, and if you haven't, then great. You get started with it. What you do is you acknowledge the negativity, okay? So they come up and they say, you know what, this never works out, or, you know, Sammy never does a good job with this, whatever else. What you do is you flip that question and you try to drive them towards action. So it's, well, how could we turn it around? What would make this situation better? Well, what would be the ideal way that this would play out? And so you get them focused on the positive thing and what the solution is. Okay, well, what can we do? What can I do? Take the onus on yourself in this case. Maybe that's how you started out with this particular employee. What can I do to see that that takes place so that you don't experience this sort of thing? Yes, complaints are a nuisance, but complaints almost always have some sort of seed of truth. So look for that particular truth. Call it out, create a little dialogue with the employee. Now, eventually where you want to take this is you want to take it to a place where you are putting the onus on them for action. So they complain about something. It's like, you know what, you're right on that. That is an issue. What do you think we should do? And so you're bringing them into the solution. What happens is they start taking a little bit more ownership of what's going on around them. And when they do that, it's not as easy to complain because it's not a me versus them. I become a larger part of the them, and that cuts down on those complaints. So create the dialogue, acknowledge, look for that seed of truth, but look to the ideal state that you want in a particular situation, and then to create an action to get there. When people have action steps, that's the main thing of getting out of negativity, getting out of a rut, is taking an action towards a goal. That is hugely motivational and hugely positive, and it gets people out of those doldrums that you might see. Let me know if that resonates with you, Nikki. If that doesn't make any sense to you, or you're looking for something else that hasn't worked, drop down in the comments and we'll keep that discussion going, because that's a great point. I know everybody out there deals with people who are complaining all of the time and they kind of bring everybody else down. Focus them on the goal, the ideal, and then find actions to get them there. Need a good plan of action. Great, David, this segues nicely. When multiple corrective actions are served and all employees served report to HR of special treatment due to inability to express other employees were in fact served corrective action. Well, this is where, and I'm breathing heavy here, because I have a love-hate relationship with most of the HR departments that I had to work with. This is where HR should be able to step in and say, no, we've looked at this policy, and this is something where this is being applied to multiple individuals. You don't know about it because you wouldn't want other individuals. So this is where HR should be able to step in. If HR won't step in, then maybe what you do is you have that discussion and you say, hey, Cameron, I know you're concerned that I'm not applying this correctly, but I assure you that I have applied it in multiple cases. Now, I'm not going to discuss who, just like you wouldn't want your peers knowing that I wrote up somebody on this, but it is being applied effectively. So I would look for that to come from HR, okay? Ideally, that's who would do it. That being said, I've run into many HR departments that don't want to get into the middle of things for some strange reason. So look to them and say, hey, I've applied it to this person, this person, this person, this person. If there's a way for me to know it, then I'm going to do something about it. Am I going to see 100% of the issues that are out there? Probably not. But those that I do see, I do address in this way. So I would lean on HR. I would lean on the fact that you're doing things the right way. Now, part of my concern with this, David, I'll take this a level deeper with this, and that is, the concern is that people aren't seeing the fairness in your leadership. That's my concern on this. Now, don't get me wrong, this could just be defensive behavior on the employee's part, looking for some last-ditch effort of justifying their bad behavior in this particular area. But I want to make sure that you are communicating with the team. Trust is developed through communication. So make sure that you are updating the team. One of the ways to do this is just having weekly updates. Maybe you email them out. It's better if it's in person or over some sort of conference call or something like that. But start keeping them informed on what's going on and start giving them the reasoning behind some of your decisions. Look to up your communication a little bit so that they understand you better, they understand the actions that you're taking, and above all, they understand why you are taking those actions. When they see you acting in a reasonable manner, in a way that they understand, then they will be more apt to take you at your word when you say, no, I am applying this fairly. You just don't necessarily see it out there. And that can be something that can help a little bit more with that. Again, let me know if that resonates with you a little bit. And if HR won't have that discussion with the employee, then you know what? Go ahead and have the discussion with the employee. Do it, respectfully, mindfully, so that they don't see everybody coming in all in a row. You don't call them in one right after the other. But I hope that helps. Joanne, Peggy, good to see you here. And Liz, good to see you here. Some organizations use performance improvement for employees that underperform. What's your take? So they call it a PIP usually. It's a performance improvement plan. And I think it's something that is good. It's required to a large extent. It's important that you set clear expectations for your team and that your whole team sees that you are holding everybody to those expectations. One of the big issues with accountability and a big issue with organizations is that they don't hold people accountable and everybody sees that. And so now there's no motivation to do an exceptional job because it just doesn't matter. And so one of the ways that you structure this is that people who consistently don't meet the expectations get put on a performance improvement plan. And this is kind of like a write-up, quite frankly, for performance. The idea behind this is that we are going to bring you in. I, as the leader, am going to coach and mentor you a little bit more. We're going to get clear on what the goals are. We're going to work through some best practices. We're going to get you shadowing the top performers, that sort of thing. We're going to give you every chance to succeed. And if you don't succeed, then you're out. And that's the hard part of leadership. You are responsible. Great concept that was talked about in yesterday's Mentor Minutes when we talked about the book Extreme Ownership. Your role is to see that everybody meets those expectations. Where they don't, you need to train and mentor those individuals, and if that doesn't work, then the hard part is that you have to let those individuals go and get people on your team that can meet those expectations. If you don't, you limit the performance of those high performers because they won't have that motivation. They won't be on a culture of excellence. And that's what you're really striving for. So no, I very much like a performance improvement plans because it becomes that very transparent, almost write up for underperforming employees and gives them the motivation to improve, or kind of the negative reinforcement, they're out. And so I'm a fan of those, quite frankly. I don't like writing people up. I don't like giving them bad news like that. But it's the responsibility that you have as a leader. And it's something that is, quite frankly, responsible for that individual as well. Nobody wants to be in a position where they aren't meeting expectations, where they are falling short of those expectations on a regular basis. That's demoralizing for an individual. And that kind of proves out that that's not an environment that that individual should be in. Luke's next question for us is, what's the most effective way to measure performance of a team with such a lot of different personalities? There's a certain art form to that, Luke. I like having a diverse workforce. I like having a whole bunch of different backgrounds. I like having a whole bunch of different personalities. But when push comes to shove, you have to try to find metrics that drive the performance of the overall goals of the organization. That may be sales. That may be customer interactions. You're looking for things that are black and white, numbers driven preferably. And you can have a soft skills component to that. And that might be, imperfect, but it's better than nothing. So you can have those soft skills components, but look for those black and white. I don't care what the personality is. Okay, I like different personalities, but I don't care what your personality is if you can't meet the expectations of sales, if you can't meet the expectations of orders shipped, of customers interacted with, of calls received, whatever it is that's important for driving the goals of the organization, whatever those metrics are, that's what you're looking for. And again, it can be imperfect, Luke. So you may not have the reporting structure that gives you that information, but you can probably get at some sort of numbers. So come up with something, roll it out, and see where it goes. You may tweak it. You may come up with some weightings for people that are working different shifts or something like that. but find a way to work with it. It's a challenge for you. It's definitely an analytical sort of thing, but be very transparent with the team through this. If it's something that you need to work on, hey, if you've got sales numbers, then great. You pull the report every day and you're good to go. But if it is something where you don't necessarily have the data, right there in front of you, be transparent with the team. Let them know where you're pulling the information from. Let them know what you're doing with it. All of those things, be very transparent, because it can be something that becomes a work in progress for the next 6 months to get something in place that tracks that performance, regardless of personality. Your top performers want to be recognized for their top performance. So bring them into the process. They should be all on board with this. All right, those that are most resistant to it are often the ones that might be your biggest problem. So it can be an indicator right there. Hope that helps out, Luke. Let me know any specifics if there's anything specific on there. Joel says the feel, felt, found approach is good as well. I'd like actually for you to, if you're still on, Joel, to kind of roll that out just a little bit more. I'm unfamiliar with that. I'm going to have to Google it after this session. But if you can explain it in comments, I'd love to have it out there. Thanks, Nikki. I'm glad you think so. How do you hold employees accountable when there's no consequences? Whoa, sorry, it jumped around there on me. When there's no consequences for not meeting throughputs. One of the big ones, that's an indicator that it would be nice if you could put some consequences to that. So maybe that's something that you can work out with corporate, the owner, whoever. In regards to this, that could be something that you work on. The other thing is peer pressure. That's one of those things that we think about in a negative, but it can be something that is, for those competitive individuals on your team, it can be a motivating factor. So the consequences can be if you find those metrics. It's, and this is a good one for those individuals who've been experienced, who have 10, 15 years and think they're the cat's meow, but they're not. Is actually posting up sales figures. And maybe you use employee numbers. Maybe you keep it anonymous. I prefer not to keep it anonymous, quite frankly. And so if you can, don't put the names up there, or use code names if all else fails, and let people see where they stack as far as performance is concerned. That's a great way. That's a consequence. That's embarrassing. That's a negative consequence when you are on the bottom, and that gives you the motivation to try to move up because you don't want to be on the bottom there. So that's one of my big things. If you can't hold people accountable, that's your negative consequence for it. The other thing as far as accountability is getting back into those ownership principles. When people have ownership over their work, they're going to naturally be held more accountable. So Luke, I would challenge you to have more conversations with your team. Ask them, give them the what. This is what we need to get done. But ask them how they think they should do it, or how they think would be best to do it. Get them invested in the plan. Get them invested in the process, because when people have an idea for something and you roll it out, they take that ownership over it. They're going to be more accountable for it. So take a look at your standard operating procedures, break it down, and throw it out to everybody. Hey, what would make this better? When people start seeing that you're putting those things into place that they came up with, they're going to have some more ownership. That's one of those cheats to it as well. The other thing in regards to, I'm just kind of coming up with some thoughts here, and I know some of it's on my pad talking about accountability here. One of the other things is actually investing in the employee. And that is looking to develop them, looking to give them shadowing in other departments, looking to build up certain skill sets, having a class on Excel, for instance, maybe even something that doesn't necessarily apply to their direct job. That can be something that moves the needle for them as far as being more accountable, because they are learning, they're growing, they're more invested in the work that they do. And when you show them the respect of investing in them and making them a more skilled worker, that's often reciprocated. So there's a bunch of different ways to kind of work this. I gave you kind of the negative one off the bat, and then a couple of more positive ones. Let me know if any of those rang true for you, or if we need to dive in a little bit more. Neil's question for us is, employees are active on employee engagement. However, it's not reflecting on performance. What actions can I implement? It's the downside of it, it's working the right type of engagement. You can get a lot of engagement from employees by playing board games all day long, but that doesn't necessarily translate into something. You have to translate that forward. It may be that you are missing the step of asking for their input, asking for more input, directing some of that engagement towards the specific plans and processes that you're working towards. Employee engagement is essential. Getting along with your employees is always better than the alternative, but you do need to direct that towards the work at hand. So I think what might be missing is a little bit of directing that engagement towards the goals of the organization, the goals of the department, towards something a little bit more practical. So ask them, if you've got that engagement, ask them, where are there opportunities that we need to take advantage of? Where are there problems we need to fix? What's going right in the organization? What's going wrong in the organization? How can I help you do a better job? Focus a little bit more on taking some of that engagement and turning it into action in the right way. That would be my advice for you, Neil. Great question. And I'll classify having a good engagement and not getting the benefit out of it as a good problem to have. So you've got the tough part, which is the engagement. Now we just need to direct it towards more specific things that affect goals. Kimberly's question is how to handle complaints from team members about a new manager who is holding people accountable and cannot be bowled over. I'm looking to tackle this from two different angles, Kimberly. I'm looking to give feedback to the new manager, and I'm looking to give feedback to the employee. So what I want you to do is I want you to talk to the new manager, and I want you to let them know that this feedback is taking place, because it's great that they can't be bowled over, but it is also almost just as likely, and you'll get a feel for this, as to whether they're a little bit abrupt. That can also be the case, or a little bit too firm in how they're giving that feedback to the employee. And one of the ways to battle that is to have the new manager look to dive in and work a little bit more as a team with a particular employee. So you fell short. The new manager says, you fell short on this particular metric. You need to have this up to a 6. What can we do to help you get there? What are some ideas that you might have? Do you need some ideas? I can put you with so-and-so. And so what it is they're holding them accountable, but they're also showing them a new path forward. They're showing that support. And that may be what's missing and what part of the complaints are that are coming from this particular new manager. What you can do is be the intermediary between the employee and the manager. And so the employee comes to you and says, whatever, this manager's too tough. Well, the manager is correct in holding you accountable. That is our expectation. Maybe what you should do next time is discuss a specific challenge that you had in meeting it and what they would recommend to address that particular challenge. Get specific with some of your concerns in meeting those expectations, and look to work with that manager a little bit more. So you're working that same angle of working together and being a little bit more of a team than from both sides of that particular equation. And that can be something that can help you out a lot in kind of bridging that divide. I hope that works for you, Kimberly. That's a tough situation to be in. But yeah, teamwork is going to be, and some more communication too. One thing I would say with this, Kimberly, is to look to up that communication with the new manager. It may be that they pull the team together and give them updates on what's going on in the organization, that sort of thing. But look to up the communication a little bit more so they get more understanding behind what's going on. It's also important from a communication standpoint that new manager is communicating the why. Why is this particular expectation important to the organization? Why does it matter? So when people understand that why, they can get a little bit more of an understanding of why the manager might be a little bit firm in how they communicate. The flip side of that accountability equation is one that's, I don't want to say too accountable, but accountable, and the feedback from the team isn't good. Nia's next question is how to respond to an employee who states to other employees that they will only do what they're getting paid for, their job title. Example, cashier, delivery driver, etc. How to respond to an employee who states to other employees. You know what, I'd handle it directly. Yeah, I really would. I'd pull that particular employee into the office, and this is one of those firm conversations that you have where, I understand that you are a cashier, but the expectation here is that you will do other jobs as required. So the overall organization, we're all a team here. And just like you would hope that Cameron, would help out the cashier desk when there's a huge long line, we want to make sure that everybody is available to help with delivery, with stocking the shelves if necessary. That is not ideal. Ideally everybody would have, their particular segments, but here, this is the culture that we work with. And that's what the expectation is for everybody. And so, hopefully you have in your job description other duties as required. That's kind of your catch-all for that, and you can go ahead and reference that. But say that that's the expectation and come down firm on it. This isn't a discussion. Okay, this is one of those situations where you're not having an open discussion. You are stating the facts on what the situation is. All right, I'm glad we were able to clear on that. Now, let's get to work. And so you're going to have that conversation with them. You can also, have an overall discussion in regards to teamwork. Have people shadow a little bit more. Find opportunities for people to work together. So it's not just this particular employee acting alone, that you're actually pairing them with somebody else. Now, I realize that would create a discussion that takes place, but it usually makes it a little bit more palatable when you're not going alone on something. So that I'd handle that particular situation directly and let them know what the situation is and what your expectations are. Get crystal clear with it. If they don't like it, that's a shame. And that's not the situation that you want to be in. But there's other jobs out there. Oof. I always hate to say that, but depending on the response that you get, you may need to get firm. Because what happens a lot of times in those difficult and firm conversations, and one of my hot button issues is when people say, that's not my job. Oof, that one gets me fired up. And so oftentimes what will happen is they'll come back firmer. Well, that's fine, because you can go ahead and go over the top with more firmness, and eventually somebody backs down. And it could be that person ends up leaving the organization. Okay, that's fine. You wouldn't necessarily want somebody who's not going to be a team performer on there. I know that's a harsh way to go with it, but sometimes you have to get firm with employees and let them know that this is the way it is. I'm a big fan of dialogue, but lots of times on culture issues, things like this, where people are not being team players, there isn't much room for dialogue on those sorts of things. Christine has a question, and it's how do you get underperformers to truly perform and meet the KPIs of the whole team? Christine, it's working with them. And I'll back away for just a second, and that is you will not be able to get 100% of underperformers to meet your expectations. There will be some people that fall through the cracks, that for whatever reason the job isn't right for, that can't build the skills that they need. So realize that you can't get 100%, but getting involved with the employee a little bit more. Where are their struggles? Where specifically are they underperforming? Do they know what the top 5 tips are? Are they actually following those tips? And are they actually asking for upsells? Are they actually saying thank you? Are they asking to do a cross-sell on something? Are they actually following through on what those best practices are? So work with them, but really look to know what their struggles are, what they're seeing, why they think that they aren't meeting those expectations, because what you can do is then create that dialogue and that plan. It's training and it's mentoring. That's how you get underperformers to get back up to satisfactory performance. I know that puts the onus on you to invest more time and more effort into that employee, but it's something that is necessary and needs to take place to see whether this job is right for every single employee that you have. Another way to do this is and to take a little bit of the time element, is have them shadow some of your high performers. Have them shadow some of your medium performers. Almost everybody can learn something, a tip and a trick and whatever else, from another individual on the team. So expose them to some of those best performers to see some tips and tricks, and then follow up with that conversation. You need that follow up to make sure they're getting something. So Christine, in your case, I'd say, have Cameron meet with Joel. And so, but the the idea behind this and the goal behind this, Cameron, is that you're going to come back to me with 3 things that you can work on, 3 things that you learned, 3 things that you can apply that are going to improve this particular metric. That's really how you dive in, is you get more personally invested in the particular employee. Now, what you can learn from this is things that you need to then include in the training. So you can make modifications to your training material to include some of those best practices. If there's a hurdle that all of your underperformers are having trouble getting over, then maybe you address that in training as well, right off the bat. Joel follows up, thank you, I appreciate this. I understand how you feel. This wording lets a customer know that you heard him or her and can relate. Initially, other top purchasing agent CEOs might have felt that way. Oh, sorry. You are letting him or her know that the initial thoughts are common and meaning a situation. What they found, however, is that after doing X and Y, this is what happened. That's an example. Great. So Joel was explaining a concept in regards to feelings and found, and I'm mixing it up right here, but that's a really great way. And that's back to my hospitality days here in Las Vegas when you would deal with an upset customer. I'd usually come to them right away and say, you know what, in your situation, I would be just as pissed off, if not even more than you are. But here's what we're going to do. And so what you're doing is you're building that understanding right off of the bat. And that's what breaks down so many of those defenses. And that can make those difficult conversations easier. Hey, I understand that you're struggling in this area. We all struggle in an area or two. So we just have to find a way to get past it. So you're building that bridge. But great comment. I appreciate everybody who jumps on here with some ideas of their own. I love rounding out the discussion because I don't pretend to have all of the answers here. Luke struggles with the metrics because the whole team needs to perform together on a production line, which means I don't have individual metrics, and I've tried several times to get them involved, and I get blanked looks and shrugs. I will try the third option. Thank you. The other thing to do is work on those sorts of team building things. And so, we can come out with all kinds of things, but getting to know one another a little bit better, simple team building exercises on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, Luke. And I know that some of those times, some of those things get eye rolls and people think it's ridiculous. But what happens is if you do them consistently, and you can Google tons of 5 and 10 minute team building activities, but if you do them 3, 4, 5 times, all of a sudden, everybody after 5 times has learned something that they didn't know about other individuals on the team, and they see the value in something that's silly and something that's playful. It doesn't need to take a lot of time, but what you can do is work it from a team building aspect. So sure, in this case, your hard metric is the end product that everybody is working on. So you need to work it from more of a team building aspect of things. And I think 5 or 10 minutes over the course of 2 weeks is time well spent if you can get people to work a little bit more together. That works that peer pressure. So if I'm part of a team, I don't want to let Cameron down because I just found out that him and I grew up in the same town. Something along those lines to build those bonds of teamwork. That might be a way to tackle it a little bit more. But yes, the engaging aspect and getting them involved in the process and how they think they can make it better is also something that can work, Luke. So I hope that helps. Feel, felt, found. Thank you. That's whatever. So Joel, I didn't want to scroll up to the top of this feed. So when having those difficult discussions, acknowledge how they feel. This is how I felt, and this is what we found when we looked into it a little bit more. And overcoming objections, understanding how you feel. Yes, great stuff. Thank you for that, Joel. That's fantastic. Carol, good to see you here. Nia, I'm glad you think I rock. I try. Sharon, getting some great help here, thanks. Northern Ireland, very nice, Sharon. Good to see you on the other side of the pond. Never miss this. And Sandra tunes in on iTunes. I love those people. For everybody who's on here and is tuned in a little bit late, you can always check out these. I throw these up on my podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes. I'll have the link here. I put them up on YouTube as well. So you can kind of take these things with you. It is a great exercise to just go through and start thinking about leadership, thinking about real issues, because you might not be able to relate to the specific question, the specific incident that we're talking about, but there's almost always correlations that go along And who's to say you don't actually deal with that specific incident in some point in your career? Well, we call customers agree as we get into the product. Okay, Carol has a good one here. We set expectations at the beginning, customers agree, but as we get into the project, more and more customer attendees are not coming to the call. I send out weekly updates through email, no one comments. How do I re-engage the customer? I find most of the attendees are from my team. What I'm gonna say here is the issue is, Carol, they're not finding value. So it may be that you're having weekly updates, but there's so little that's happening on a weekly basis that they're not finding that value. And so I would look to actually decrease the frequency, okay? Unless it's absolutely pertinent, decrease the frequency. So it might be bi-weekly, or it might be monthly. And in a lot of cases, having worked with B2B clients before, in a lot of cases, you actually go all the way out to a quarterly metric where you're having that meeting. So you really knuckle down to like a specific report that you might be sending out on a monthly basis, but you actually meet on a 3-month basis. That's, I think, my issue with it, is that you're setting up a project and you might be meeting too frequently. I would, if you met every single day, would there be something to talk about? That might be the flip side of this. If you disagree with that statement, if you think it's important, and it can be for a project to meet on a weekly basis, then you need to get more granular with it, Carol, and what's in it for the customer, all right? The WIFM, that's the main motivating factor, is what's in it for me. And so try to find a way to make it personally relevant. It may be that you actually use a pressure method where you might be working with managers, but on a monthly basis, you meet with their vice president. Or on a quarterly basis, you meet with their vice president. That's that little stick to the carrot that gets people on task if you really need their feedback on those sorts of things. But this may be a situation, and I love meetings in the right setting, but this may be a situation where you're meeting too frequently. That's my thought process on that. Definitely ping me back if you don't think that's the case, or I'm not getting the context right. Definitely let me know about it, and we can kind of follow up on it. I am all caught up on questions, so if you have any questions, drop down in the comment section. I will answer them in real time. Otherwise, I'll kind of go through my spiel. I talked about it before. I'm going to publish the link to to my YouTube channel, so you can check them out there. That's actually, believe it or not, where I listen to a whole lot of podcasts, is actually through YouTube. But then it'll have the link to iTunes and SoundCloud as well. I'd love to have you on board there. Just something that on your commute you can kind of listen to and just kind of think through these things. And it'll make you a better leader, I hope, but it'll also help you with your peers and being a leader amongst your greater team of peers and bosses as well. That's really the goal behind this. So if you have any other questions, anything that pops to mind, drop down in the comments, send me an email, and I will get it on the next episode of Mentor Minutes. Otherwise, everybody have a great weekend out there. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.